We have some pretty amazing folks up here. I don't even know where to start. There's so much going on. So I think I'll let you guys introduce yourselves. And going to get started with Bay here from Brinc, and give a little quick intro to what Brinc is doing in Hong Kong and around the world.
I think it's some Hong Kong pride more than anything. But I just want to give you guys a quick overview. Every time I get to come here, I feel super fortunate. It's been 2.5 years since I moved from San Francisco to Hong Kong. Everyone there has been super welcoming, and you guys are even more amazing having me back. So I want to just walk you through a little bit about who you can talk to here. That's me. You can talk to me. You can also talk to Jonathan. Raise your hand, Jonathan, over there. He's now moved from Hong Kong to San Francisco. And we're just what we call an ultra hands-on accelerator for IoT. What that kind of means is we don't stop, and I don't know when we ever will stop in terms of helping our founders. We're 18 months in on some of our investments, and they're still living with us in Hong Kong. They're still working with us. So we just want to do everything we possibly can to help you when you're building IoT companies. These are some of the products. You can just check it out, Brinc.io. I want to go over a couple products you guys can check right now. So PillDrill, just pilldrill.com. They're actually shipping next week. So pretty awesome on their website. They launched 8 weeks ago and they're already shipping. If you want to get that, it helps you take your pills or someone you know in your family. Really fantastic platform. Renert, they'll be in every single Guitar Center across America next week. So 270 some stores. They've already shipped 15,000 units out. You can buy it on their website or buy it at a Guitar Center near you if you're a musician. Audio, they've delivered their crowdfunding now. They're on pre-order, sorry, I guess what would you call it? It's not pre-order now. It's like back order. So they just put in another 10,000 pieces, so you'll be getting it probably in the next 4 to 6 weeks if you want to check out some amazing audio products. Here's a great conference. Has anyone been to Hong Kong? That's my biggest question. Okay, cool. What about China? Whoa, there's more for China. Did you catch that? Okay, China, Hong Kong. Whoa, what? Okay, fair enough. If you want to come to a conference, we renamed our last conference. We're now focusing on the Internet of Life, because IoT is much bigger, as all of us will talk about, than just the thing. So we're trying to talk about the after effect, actually the kind of next step, which is the effect it has on us as humans. If you'd like to come, it's iolsummit.io. And we're announcing something new today, I guess I announced it with you guys on Thursday night? Yeah, Thursday night, but I didn't have a website, not a website. So if you haven't been to China, my big feedback to every founder we meet is, you need to just try it. It's not that scary, you need to come. Yeah, you'll be there in September, October, we're gonna see what you think. So we're trying to make it easier for anyone. So if you'd like to go to this website, just brinc.io/trip to China, or go to our events page, sign up, and if enough of you sign up, we're actually just gonna throw a date out. We're gonna work with Hopper, try to find a cheap flight, and if you guys can get yourself over, we'll take care of the rest. So we're going to help you have space in Hong Kong, we're going to put you on a bus, we're going to pick you up in Washan Bay, we're going to take you to a factory. We want you guys to see and understand China, because we find that this is one of the biggest, most challenging parts, is taking that first step to understanding what happens after you've got the world excited about what you're making. Because then you realize you made a lot of promises that are going to kind of get in your way. So we want to get you guys there earlier. So if you guys want to sign up, we'd be happy to work with you. I want to call out one more group, Invest Hong Kong. You want to raise your hand quickly? So Invest Hong Kong, please talk to these ladies afterwards. They have an amazing team, and they help any foreign company that wants to come to Hong Kong get the right resources. Absolutely unbelievable. They've helped all of our founders, including us, come from around the world and move to Hong Kong. So that's enough about me. I could brag on you guys. I want to see what you say, and I might reintroduce you if you don't say enough cool stuff. So why don't you go first?
All right, sure. My name is Thomas. I'm a Cal alumni, so go Bears. I've been starting companies all my life. My first one is Streetline, and we raised about $60 million. It was sold last year. And my second venture is a smart door lock company. It ended up merging into August Home. I don't know how many of you have heard of the August Smart Lock. And now I'm working on my new venture called Brava, which would hopefully launch early next year. It's a cooking device, and it will be a lot of fun. So I'm here to share some of my entrepreneurship journey and stories, and hopefully answer some of your questions. So.
Hi, I'm Jay Adelson. I'm a venture capitalist. Long-time entrepreneur. I've started, I think now 14 companies in 25 years in the Bay Area. Believe me, I wish They were all great successes. Of course, most of them were whiffs, but been doing this a while. Now my new firm is called Center Electric. We started 2 years ago. We're focused on internet infrastructure and IoT as a sort of an investment thesis. Our belief at a high level is that over the next 3 to 4 years, we're going to get an additional 80 billion connected devices, a lot of it industrial, some of it consumer. And frankly, the internet that we built is kind of broken, and it's not really designed for what we're going to do. So that's our entire investment thesis. If you're in that space and you want to talk to us, please find me after.
Doug Renert. I'm also a venture capitalist. I have been for, I guess, 9 years now. I was also an entrepreneur before I started my fund. It's called Tandem Capital. We're on our 3rd fund now. We actually started out by investing in kind of disruptive startups that were taking advantage of the introduction of the smartphone. And then we did some tablet-based kind of startups when that came out. And then we decided that IoT was kind of the next platform that would create lots of disruptive startups. And so we started investing in IoT companies about 3 years ago. Actually, our first investment was in Tile. I don't know if you guys know Tile. So we do pre-seed. We were the first check into Tile, and we kind of have a studio that does brand building and growth and distribution. So we created the Tile video and built their website and ran the campaigns. Initially, they only had 2 guys, and then as they gained momentum, we handed everything off to them, helped them raise their kind of institutional seed round, and then we never see them anymore. They never come back and say hello. They're doing well now. We've done about 20 hardware startups since then. Our current fund's a $100 million fund, so we'll do pre-seed all the way to seed and right up to $2 million checks in seed rounds. And we will do connected devices, whether they're consumer or enterprise, and we also like kind of infrastructure type stuff in IoT as well. We've done a handful of those. So that's Tandem in a nutshell.
All right. So yeah, well, hardware startups haven't really been around, this whole concept, not too long. It's been really focused and built by a big business. Historically, it's been very difficult to compete. So what we really have here is some of the veterans of the space, particularly VCs, willing to take the plunge and give it a gamble and successfully to start. So it's really an honor for me to be on stage with you guys. And I'm gonna throw out a little bit of softball. I want you guys to take these questions, a lot of the background and experience, so run with it the way you think. But we're here to support hardware startups, and IoT particularly, there's a lot of ways to go, I think. So generally, what one piece of advice would you guys give to a hardware startup getting started in IoT today? So they're just building their company. What are some things that they typically overlook, or that you would think would be the best piece of advice you can give?
This could take all night.
I guess my advice would be to plan ahead. So a lot of people say building hardware is difficult, right? I'll just summarize it in a mathematical way, perhaps. It's a different way of looking at it. So let's say I have a hardware that has 500 components in there, right? Software, hardware, whatever pieces. And your team is so good that you have a 99% probability of delivering any given piece. Well, the aggregate probability that you're going to deliver all 500 pieces on time, on budget, and on everything is less than 1%. You can actually just calculate the probability out. So what I meant by this, it sounds very scary, but it is really about going meticulously through every one of those. It doesn't have to be just components or software or engineering pieces, but also the business plan, right? Like a lot of the time, marketing and sales is overlooked. A lot of the time, distribution is overlooked. So go through every piece of the business from the day it started all the way to when you think it would exit, and plan every little step, because all it takes is one little one for the company to did not do so well.
This is like the last thing you want to hear, but I think it was after the first 3 or 4 companies we worked with, I started realizing, oh, we need a business plan template. And that sounds insane because in the Valley with software, it's the anti-MBA, anti-business school type of mentality. It's just ship, refine, iterate. And I just started realizing, it's like, we actually need to create financial cash flow model templates. We need to create business plan templates. We need to have marketing plan templates. Like I want to see how the founder thinks and that they're willing to go to that depth and make sure it all adds up because it will change. But they need to understand the compounding effect of the integration of all the steps. And that's, for me, it's more of a mental exercise. And a lot of people sort of just spurn that and say, oh, like, why did we do this? Or they do it really kind of half-assed. And that's when I realized, like, okay, like, they're not going to sweat the detail, and that's going to be a real problem. So I think it's funny. I mean, having moved from here into Asia and Hong Kong and Shenzhen, it's like, how did I leave all this kind of programming and then find out that I'm back to business school all over again?
I have a simple thought on this, which is just raise more money. I know it sounds so self-centered. Well, I think it comes down to, with all due respect to all the planning you can do and all the models you can follow, you're going to get it wrong. You're going to have to reiterate. You're going to have to reboot and start over. And what that means is time. And what money buys you is time. Right? There's 2 ways to extend that time. One is to have more money. The other is to burn less capital. You're a hardware startup. So I'm just going to give you the benefit of the doubt that you're going to probably spend it. So I would just say raise more than you thought you would need and try and spend as little as possible. It sounds obvious.
Yeah, I would say the same thing to hardware startups as I say to any startup, which is do as much customer development as you can before you start going too far on the product itself. Like when we started Tandem 9 years ago, had nothing to do with hardware, but one of our Tandem's first investors was Steve Blank, who, I don't know if any of you know him or how many of you know him, but he basically was behind what became Lean Startup with Eric Ries, and we'd have him come and meet with all our companies, and I kind of got to know his pitch by heart. And I still apply all those things to hardware startups because you can actually figure out, I think mostly if there's demand for your product before you really start working on the product itself. I mean, now we have pre-sale campaigns, obviously, and you can even do stuff before you do a Kickstarter. You can do test advertising on Facebook and see, does anybody click on this damn thing if I show this kind of widget with this message, or does everybody ignore it? If it's enterprise, you can go get hopefully 5 enterprise customers will say, yeah, we'll run a pilot on that if you in fact deliver it to us. So, I mean, we've made this mistake as investors too many times where we fall in love with the product. The founders and we have not done customer development, and then 18 months later when the product is finally built, we realize, wow, the demand for this isn't quite there. And then it's like, do you have time to pivot? Not unless you raised more money. So.
It's the first time I've been a moderator, by the way. It's really hard to hold back my opinions when I think you guys have a lot of great ideas. Cool, all right, I'm going to switch over to a little bit China side in Asia. So how can Silicon Valley startups here best leverage the resources besides manufacturing? And I think everyone's kind of aware of that manufacturing overseas, but I live there a third of the time. There's a lot going on. There's new kind of abilities of labor and so forth that are coming on. And so what would you say to the Silicon Valley startups with the resources that they have here that they could work with China or Asia in ways beyond manufacturing?
We just did a program with MIT where we had 12 students from MIT come over and join 12 students from Hong Kong universities, and that proved to be really successful. And we've done this before with MIT and with HKUST and Waterloo before, where we say, hey, let's go ahead and get some teams that are out of college and see how that goes. And what we found is that the talent is really amazing in Southeast Asia, not just Hong Kong or China. And so I think what I find here is that there's a lot of that front-end power and experience and access and understanding and sort of just inbred to people here. And there's a lot of the back-end power that's naturally there. They come from families and generations that have been doing this, so they don't think about the things that maybe you do, but they also are ingrained with physical distribution, retail, trade, manufacturing. They just have grown up around their friends or their neighbors, their parents, their uncles or aunts. It's just standard. So they're usually an arm's length away from someone. It could be an amazing resource to founders here to kind of check those lists, think it through it, kind of go through that. So I really think that you should look for talent. I've had a lot of teams here that have to hire talent here. Like one of the professors I was talking with at Berkeley before this was saying an introductory CS student out of Berkeley right now is getting $150,000 US starting salary. Like that is insane. That doesn't make any freaking sense. Like you could have 10, 12 people in China crushing product development for you for one person doing CS, right? So I think there's a partnership that needs to be made there, and that's one of the biggest things that we ask our founders to do is get comfortable going across borders and actually learn how to leverage the best of both ecosystems. So for me, I'm gonna just say talent.
Well, I guess I'll second that as well. My experience has been more related to manufacturing, but something I found to be quite interesting is that a lot of the time, overseas labor have been stereotyped as being less in quality. That is actually not the case for manufacturing. So manufacturing experts actually, in fact, are better in Asia in every way. And I think it's part of the reason for that is because we as a country have lost most of our talent to Asia when it comes to manufacturing. So we do have talent, but most of them are probably 50 years old by now, and most of them have changed their careers by now. And all the state-of-the-art stuff is done overseas. So these days, I actually found myself going to China not because of the cost, but because of the superior process capability companies are able to provide over there instead of here. So, yes, in short, talent.
Yeah, I can't speak from experience of spending a lot of time overseas. Well, I can say one thing. I did one startup that back in the early 2000s that ended up really becoming merged, taken over by businesses out of Southeast Asia, Equinix, which is now, now it's like the largest data center company in the world. But that wouldn't have happened if we hadn't been schooled by basically our partners in Southeast Asia back then. And I think the key was we had a certain arrogance about our knowledge of infrastructure in the space, that because we thought of ourselves as like the inventors of so many things, that we presumed that we were better at it than I think our partners overseas. And it almost killed the company. In fact, it was hours away from killing the company. And we were rescued by, at the time, it was Singapore Telemedia, but really there were so many really experienced, talented groups out there that were basically running circles around us in terms of ability to deploy product and deploy it quickly, and even operate the infrastructure. Yet our perception of it was completely different. We imagined, data centers that were, raining indoors and insecure. And then when we went to visit, it was kind of the opposite. So I guess just my only thing is the presumption that because we've invented something, or maybe an idea may have had an origin here in the Bay Area, is pretty much where it ends. And you go to Southeast Asia, they have incredible ability to execute. That's all I got.
Okay. Well, I think here's a question for you. So you guys have kind of focused on a bit of a different model as VCs, I'd say, and really getting a bit deeper with your companies, which I think for hardware is critical. And I'd love to hear kind of your experiences from doing that and kind of changing that model a bit. What are the pros, the cons? What have you learned from doing that a bit different?
Well, one of the reasons we now do traditional seed where we don't get as involved is because sometimes I have a lot of scars from being so involved. I enjoy it. I have been a kind of entrepreneur and operator for 16 years, I guess, before I became a VC, and it was, it wasn't easy going over to the dark side, but I decided to do it. And part of the reason we stayed active, my partner and myself initially, was we didn't really want to become VCs, so this was like this was like purgatory, we weren't going all the way to hell, we were just kind of not quite there. But I don't know, this may be too much information, but as an investor, if you have to help your companies so much, you have to be careful about adverse selection, because the companies who don't need any help could actually, are likely the best companies, right? And so they go out there and they get VCs to write them checks right away, and they start cranking on their business or bring on board whoever they need. Our companies, where we're pre-seed, for whatever reason, can't do that. So we're looking for kind of the perfect situation, the team that needs help but doesn't suck, in a sense. They need help, but they need a particular area, and right when we give them that help, everything's going to come together. It's going to be perfect. VCs are going to start throwing their money in there. They're going to hire everybody they need, and then again, leave our offices and never have to come back, in a sense. So that does happen sometimes, but I will say that most of the time it does not, and for us at least. So we just have to have, honestly, a high tolerance for working with teams that don't get there sometimes, and still kind of fighting the fight. And sometimes, like Bay was saying, you don't even know 12 or 18 months in if the thing's gonna crush it, especially in hardware. It just takes so long. So you kind of have to have fortitude. And that is the one good thing about being a VC, is you have a portfolio. So even if, again, maybe too much information, but if 10 of the companies fail, hey, if you have 5 that crush it, and in a way it doesn't matter. So that's kind of how we've been handling it. It's fight hard on everyone. Don't beat yourself. He says, an investor, we don't beat ourselves up too much if some of them don't make it. I don't know if you've heard the term, the parent is only as happy as his or her unhappiest child. That does happen sometimes as a VC, but you have to almost fight it, or else you'll always be depressed. Because if you've got a portfolio of 40 companies, there are at least going to be a few that are in real dire straits at any given time. So anyway, we've got thick skin now, and like I said, we started doing traditional seed capital, so we could have some companies that actually didn't need our help as much, and that's kind of a breath of fresh air. I mean, we can help them, but it's like, hey, I'll make this intro to you, and I write an email in about 35 seconds, and I'm done, and I think that was great. So much. Whereas like in these other cases, we may, we spend months creating websites and videos and running campaigns, and it may not work, and then, everybody's like, oh, thanks, but that didn't help that much.
So I think we're early days, and the reason that I have all these guys here is I respect the hell and look up to all these guys for different reasons. And I think from Doug's perspective, I very rarely see VCs like yourself that are willing to put the additional money down and kind of build that more of a smaller Andreessen model where you just roll up your sleeves. And that's kind of where we hit it off, and I was like, okay, we think alike, interesting. Because in IoT, I really wasn't willing with my partner to say, let's throw the baby with the bathwater out, which sort of means after 3 months in a program that, oh, you're good, no problem, you're totally set, you're gonna nail it. And it just seemed not obvious that this is never gonna happen, right? IoT is not gonna magically happen, so we just kept adding on longer and longer, and I think we'll have to figure out a model that allows us a little more scale. We're still really small, we only have 13 portfolio companies, so we're not even at 1 a month, it's quite slow, but what's also nice is we've done the opposite, we've self-funded everything. So we haven't taken any institutional LPs, so we're quite flexible and we can learn and we can do different things. So we're not necessarily just a program, we're not necessarily just a studio, we're not necessarily just a go-to-market program. It's what do you need? Because we do lots of different things. And we might be able to stitch together new partners or new services on the fly for different teams, different times. So we're still learning quite a bit, but IoT for me is a no-brainer. It can't be short. There's nothing short about IoT, so not that I disagree, actually a lot of the teams that leave those shorter programs come join us afterwards, which is great. But it just seems clear that IoT is changing. It's a long form sort of business model, and that you need to keep going and then figure out a model that gives you a little more scale and sort of hedges your bets a little bit. We definitely haven't figured it all out yet, but we know that long is clear. You gotta go long. Jay's gonna be like, no, I disagree.
I'm trying to balance, I'm having an identity crisis, is what's happening. So I'm a venture skeptic. I'll let you in on a little secret about venture capital. It doesn't scale. And the reason it doesn't scale is because if you're a useful VC and you're actually good at affecting the outcomes of your companies, and you have a good track record, you're actually capable of getting more of your companies to the next round, that means that you're using up more of your time with those winners. And it depends on you having some failures in order for your time to free up so that you can invest money again in the next fund. And this process repeats itself until a venture capitalist becomes completely worthless. And I have so many I've respected over the years who I've seen this happen, where as they got better and better at their game, they became less and less useful to the entrepreneurs. And so there's a problem inherent in the model. He's talking about how it's a breath of fresh air to become more passive. When we go to our LPs and we talk about why they should put money into our fund, part of our story is we're not VCs originally. We think that we can affect the outcome of a company in some way. But how many companies can you do that for? So we kind of did our own little back of the napkin calculation, 5 or 6 at a time, maybe. And if your firm is doing well and people are throwing money at you, you're going to have a lot more active companies than 5 or 6 or 10 if 2 partners. Andy Smith, who's my partner, is also a graduate of that whole, he teaches with Steve and does the whole lean launchpad thing. It is so critical that we apply those theories and those concepts to ourselves as a venture firm, because it's impossible to scale. So we want to be that more hands-on, and that's our intent. And we're still scratching our heads a little bit about what happens Fund 4, Fund 5, how we really get it there without it just becoming sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Tough question.
We're really helping you out here. Yeah, this is my therapy session.
Okay, switching gears a little bit, and we'd love to hear from all you guys on this, is what IoT categories do you feel are the most and the least saturated?
So I'm going to be a little bit more general. So the most saturated are devices no one needs. And the least saturated are the ones that we all need a lot more. So I say that connected home is really saturated with sandbox devices that are not going to ever integrate, and that doesn't make sense. So I think, with Apple's announcement, I'm ex-Apple, full disclosure, but I think they have a real chance at maybe making this part of our normal homes and not just gadget freaks like all of us that want to connect everything and we'll open 7 apps and try to integrate them with Zapier and Ift and all this other stuff. Like, no one's going to do that, right? And opening, turning your lights on and the door lock and everything else takes longer than it does just to do it normally. So, the utility isn't necessarily there. Investor in August. So I think it's going to be, for me, I'm really, really, really bullish on health, but I really think you can do it in consumer. I don't think you have to have FDA 2 and 3 certified companies to make real sense of our bodies. So I really love companies that are looking to unlock a part of our day-to-day, bodies. That's not going to obviously be a second wearable on the wrist. That's not going to work. But something that's niche, maybe we have a couple companies that are doing Alzheimer's or heart, like things that are specific that a certain group needs this information. So let's get that unlocked for them. And then the teams that are sitting on top of them in the AI or the software layer to make sense of it, because we know the doctors can't. And so to me, that's where I want to see a lot more. And I don't think you have to go medical certification to do so. We've seen companies and invested in companies that we're so bullish on to help people deeply. And it's with consumer tech that works. And so I think it's going to be a kind of a multi-stage aggregate approach here. But we need people to start these kind of companies to quickly unlock it. and then partner with great companies. Most companies can't do data in-house, unfortunately, right now. We wish they could, but they generally can't. And then start making real changes to all of our lives. So less than maybe connected home.
You obviously think consumer is a good direction to go and connected home.
It's different. Well, I mean, I have a different worldview because I tend to be heads down working on my own company. But I would say when I'm between projects, what I look for aren't really the hottest stuff that's on the media right now. That, by definition, is almost the worst market to go into because it's red hot in the media because there are already a few incumbent players in there. And what I meant by incumbent, it doesn't mean the large companies, I meant the red hot new startups. An example of that would be virtual reality and augmented reality right now. There are a lot of very exciting and well-funded startups in the space already. I think, this is just my opinion, I think it will shake out to be one or two winners out there with a lot of content providers rallying behind these platforms. The question is which one or two, I have no idea. But it's unlikely going to be my new startup that I start today. So that would be sort of my way of answering this question.
So our investment, we kind of look at the stack and we invest across the stack. We do some connected device stuff, but we do across. We consider it all IoT because you can't operate the devices if you don't have the cloud to connect it to. And so in the stack universe, if somebody comes to me with another fog computing startup, I'm going to explode. Like it's just, I can't handle another fog computing startup. It's important. It's a technology that needs to be there, but there are too many racing. It reminds me of like when there was all these storage networking companies that all popped up around 2002. There was like 100 of them at a conference. When you have a conference just for that small category, it's generally a bad sign, right? It's sort of like, if instead of wearables, what if there was just like sleep wearables? So in the stack, that's what I feel like there's too much of that, not enough security. We need more people focused on security challenges, particularly for automated deployment and onboarding. Logistics, want to see more people thinking about sort of a catch-up, French fries, a catch-up delivery vehicle. We got to think of sensors and hardware as a software delivery vehicle and a data delivery vehicle. And stop worrying about getting the thing pretty. Just get the data out there and make sure that when you deliver it, it's so seamless that I don't have to be trained in order to leverage the data that I'm getting from that hardware.
Yeah, I mean, I actually have a pretty similar opinion in terms of the trends that I think are almost played out and some that I think are, underserved. I also think connected home and wearables, for that matter, has way too many entrants. I mean, how many devices can each of us put on our wrist? Maybe two, but more often than not, zero. So I think there's way too many of those. And the connected home thing, I think it's a little too obvious, and it's kind of a rich person's problem at some level. Like, there's a lot of these valley companies that are solving rich people's problems, and I think it's partly because of the VCs, we're at fault, but founders too. I mean, I saw three companies within the span of 6 months that were trying to solve kind of like the universal remote, smart home hub problem, and they were all literally came from the same genesis, which was a founder had sold his previous company for $300 million, or you name it, and they had bought their new house, and they were setting up this house, and it was so hard to get the stereo to sync with their 7 TVs, and I literally heard the same thing from 3 different people that landed on more or less the same product. So way too much of that. In terms of stuff I'd like to see, I mean, we will do many different things, but I actually like solving problems I would have never thought of in industries that I wasn't thinking of. So, because often those are the underserved spaces. We didn't invest in this company. I saw a company that was doing sensors for grain shipments, okay? And they actually came with their deck, and they said something like, I can't remember the exact number, but you know, $100 billion worth of grain is shipped around the world every year, and 25% of it actually is thrown away because of spoilage and pestilence. And these sensors could essentially cut that in half, and you did the math, and you're like, holy cow, that's a $12 billion, TAM right there. And is anybody else thinking about this problem? I mean, probably not. So kind of almost arbitrary stuff like that actually gets me interested, because I feel like that isn't something that 35 startups are all chasing.
Can't believe nobody said fitness trackers. Right, it's really old news right now. All right, so Jay, I would love to hear, specific to your question to you about kind of what you're focusing on. It's all a bit stuff, but why is the internet broken? What is going to break here?
I'll get in trouble. We gotta be careful. Oh, I just want to point out that I'm the only one on the panel that doesn't have a smartwatch on, unless you count this Casio invented in 1982. Which, by the way, how long does it take me to tell what time it is? Oh, done. No buttons. No voice recognition. It's 8:45. Just saying. Just put it out there. So an easy way to think about this is that the internet was built for the thing it's not supporting at any given time, right? So it was built for small transactions, then we re-engineered it for video streaming. Now we got video streaming, now you're going to be delivering small transactions again. Hundreds of billions, trillions of small transactions. The computing moved from the edge to the core. Now the computing has to move back to the edge again, right? As things become smarter and the whole fog concept of this. And so really, if you talk to the folks who are operating the backbones of the internet today, they're terrified about this shift. The carriers are a little confused. They think it's a volume problem. Like they literally think they don't have enough capacity. I'm not sure that's so much the issue. It's just that the stack was designed for a different kind of amount of traffic and layering and so forth. All the little hacks that we're doing around communications are band-aids. In terms of the hardware we use for deep packet inspection and the security technologies we use to protect ourselves, and the power consumption that we're expecting this stuff to take, and our little band-aids. And so I think that the unified view, well, not unified, but there's a very large view that is that we're going to have to re-architect the entire thing. And we've always been doing that to some extent, but the opportunity now, I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. Domain name services. We all use it, we all understand it. My 13-year-old knows what a domain name is now. OpenDNS sold to Cisco last year, I think, for like 680 million, something like that. Now, OpenDNS was a company that was already like 12 years old, like grandfathers of internet tech, like David Yulovich founded. I mean, this is a technology that was probably best in class. Cisco acquired it and hadn't really changed their product much. You'll hate me for saying this, but for like a decade, right? And the signal used to determine what response you get for your domain name, like what IP address, maybe is geographic. Okay. Is there anything else we can use to determine what the maybe load, or maybe other API signals, other signals coming from all of this data, this big data we're collecting? And so we're looking. So we presumed that would be a problem. We asked the customers of these services if it's a problem. They said it was. We got all these new wearables and things generating new data. What will be the new infrastructure company that's the next generation OpenDNS? Who is it? And who's excited enough about it that it's not a consumer product, that they're going to jump in and build it. And that's another interesting thing that we've seen, is that a lot of these companies are started by the guys who did it before once or twice. So, and the other thing we've noticed is they're not here as often as we'd like them to be. I mean, it would be great if they're in our backyard, but they're not here. They're everywhere else internationally. And so as a VC, and I'm thinking about rebuilding the internet, I have to go everywhere, which is a daunting task. But hence, I guess, why I'm here. There you go. Is that it?
It's pretty awesome. All right, so we've got, I definitely want to leave a little bit of time. Actually, let's just jump into it. We got 10 minutes. I'm sure you guys have lots of questions. I'm going to come around you guys. When I'm on a panel, there's always that one thing I wanted to say, but I couldn't quite get it out because everyone was saying good stuff. So we'll give one, if you have anything to say, kind of to the audience at the end as a final piece of advice. But now let's open it up to questions. Anybody? Yeah, why don't you say the question? I'll repeat it.
Sure. So I've heard a lot of talk about lean, but the hardware business is totally waterfall. So walk me through why it's like that. Why can't it also ship, refine, ship?
I guess I don't fully agree with the statement that hardware has to be waterfall. And for those of you who don't know what that is, it's basically a sort of a very premeditated schedule of how to build a product. I would say a lot of it is necessary because of the physical time it takes to produce products. Like, for example, a simple piece of plastic, in order to make it, you need to actually cut into a piece of steel tube, and cutting into it and actually manipulating that physical object takes time. It takes a while to manipulate. But that's only a certain part of the, I would say, the waterfall limitation that is limited by current technology. Right? You can actually circumvent a lot of that. You can try 3D printing. You can try any other additive manufacturing. There's also a lot of simulation tools you can use to simulate the product. And in fact, I'm currently working on a cooking appliance company. Right? I actually use finite state modeling and basically software that are used to design spacecraft to simulate how to cook food on a sort of digital level. I can digitally simulate how to cook food and how it turns out. That kind of iteration cycle dramatically increases my iteration time. So in that sense, it is fast and lean, because instead of spending $50,000 to build a prototype, I can just spend hours to refine the physics and refine the result and digitally cook my food to see how it turns out.
But I mean, iterate on the shipping product. Harder problem.
Oh, that's a harder problem, yes. Once you cut the tools, depending on how expensive they are, it could be a couple $100,000. Unless you want to keep spending a couple $100,000 every time you want to change the product, it is really a limitation of economics and physical, or maybe a lot of money. Right?
All right, next question.
How far away are we from having 3D printers print products that people will just use?
So how far are we away from having 3D printers print complete products?
Yeah, you probably know more about this than I was gonna say a long time.
My answer is also a long time, but I will say as soon as you can have one that creates a product at the same speed and price point as traditional manufacturing methods. So perhaps somewhere out there, somebody is working on a thing that will enable that tomorrow. I just haven't heard of it yet.
Well, and it really depends on the complexity. So I feel like where you're already seeing that happen, what's it called? Spreadways? Is that what it's called?
Shapeways.
Shapeways, thank you. Shapeways. If you have replacement parts, where typically you'd go through a manufacturing run, there'll be enough demand to generate that kind of run. I think that a lot of that is going to shift over first. you talk about finished consumer products that get printed, yes, I agree with the other panelists on that. And then the one thing about 3D printing is that we're also seeing innovations in 3D printing in real time in terms of the technologies used and the materials that you can create from. So I don't think we're quite visualizing yet just how sophisticated these printing capabilities will be in the next 5 years. And so maybe move faster than you think.
I was reading something this week about, it was 3D printers being automated with robots. So it was the concept of sort of having a 3D printing farm with the technicians being robots. So you could just sort of put in a batch order and then people go to sleep, they don't, and they're just running around taking one thing from one 3D printer, putting it in another 3D printer, putting the next part, and it was all, it makes sense, but to get to the consumer level, it just seems so improbable. Unless you get to a
You're describing Skynet, basically.
it's closer than we all want to admit from that perspective, for sure. But I think unless we become sort of a DIY, like we want to actually assemble our own things, that could work. If they would ship us separate parts, and then we can put them together quickly, like the part is not hard. It's the final assembly, it's the integration, supporting the firmware, like getting everything just right, like testing, that's hard.
Yeah, let's throw in from a manufacturer's perspective. Products are full of different materials, right? Often materials have different processes, and then you have assembly. So if you're trying to do all of that in one machine, or even a couple of machines, you're trying to really put things together in a much different way than we've ever been used to. You could maybe have an assembly step that would do a lot, but the other problem is that also we've optimized manufacturing so well to be efficient that there's so much in there that makes it cost effective and scalable and all this other stuff that we're used to that. So if you want to, if you're willing to pay $100 for a book, even if you do it at home and you're 3D printing, yes, okay, that may be possible, but we're so used to our current pricing that it's going to be a long time until we get that far, is my guess.
I could probably contribute a little bit to that question from HP Tech Ventures. We just announced our first, HP just announced first commercial 3D printer about 6 weeks ago, which is about 10 times faster and half the cost, manufacturing cost, where you're now, think of it as kind of something that sits next to a CNC machine, where a CNC machine is subtractive. It grinds down a block of something, and where this next generation commercial grade 3D printers are additive. And they're pretty fast, they're getting a lot cheaper, and it's a lot more than prototype, and you can actually compete price-wise for small batch manufacturing. Your question about when you can print full products is actually much closer than all of you guys think, because the material science is getting a lot more advanced now. The things that we're seeing in the material side looks like Star Trek. We're doing polymers, but soon metals and ceramics. And there's a concept of a voxel, which is a volumetric pixel, which is getting smaller and smaller. And you can actually, with various alchemy, you can basically control voxel by voxel what the properties are. Is it conductive or not conductive, transparent, not transparent, flexible, not flexible, etc. So in 5 years, you'll be able to order your Nikes on Amazon and print them out. Instead of waiting for a box to ship, in 10 years, 20 years, you'll be able to print very complex electromechanical devices. So it's much closer than you all think, much closer.
Look forward to it. It'll be interesting to see.
Quick question. Is there any product area that people might not be ready for? Like given the concept that some people are afraid of self-driving cars or like privacy concerns with wearables, is there a line that's kind of like not seen right now that maybe we could push it forward?
Generally, a lot of things Elon Musk talks about, people get really stressed out about. Like the evil side of AI, neural laces that connect to your spinal cord, because the output problem is our biggest challenge. We can do input really good as humans are really terrible at output. I would think implantables. Like, there's a lot of people that are on the edge, right? They're cutting their hands open, putting sensors under their skin. I love this stuff. I don't know if I'm that hardcore. I can definitely see, things like, pacemakers and things that we're used to, sure, prosthetic heart valves, things like that. But I think we're probably not going to see that at scale readily. I do understand why people are doing it. I think there's actually some really cool kind of microdermal stuff that they put these really small pins into your skin. You don't really feel it, but it allows to have different sort of readings or data coming out of it. Like, I think that might be okay, but I doubt we're going to see implantables be anything real soon, just on the edge.
Who would do that? Who would do implantables? I mean, I'm just curious.
There's a lot of edge
Anyone?
technologists.
I wonder if anyone here though.
It's kind of crazy.
Does LASIK or any other surgery?
You have a medical condition that requires an MRI, and that's a big implantable that goes into your heart right now. There's heart variability, and so your life depends on it.
So I'll comment from the consumer side. I think a lot of technology that would be otherwise deemed as totally fringe can be improved to be more acceptable, and hence maybe have a non-zero or at least noticeable market. One example is this thing called Think, and to me it's a ridiculous product because it's about using electricity to shock the brain into having different feelings, like perhaps calming oneself or waking myself up. And they built a device that doesn't look nearly as scary as what it would have otherwise looked. I couldn't speak about their sales volume, but I would say they've done a good job to make it less scary.
Yeah, I think people are open to technology if it in fact works. Even like you said, self-driving cars. You know, a few years ago, most of us thought that was, you know, there's no way that's going to come anytime soon, and it's pretty much here now, and it just happens to, in fact, I mean, there will be some accidents, which will get a lot of publicity, but I think machines are actually going to be better drivers than humans, and I don't think the world is that far from kind of recognizing that, and then it will be widely adopted. And I think almost any of these other areas, if the technology actually works, the consumer or the market will come around pretty quickly.
Okay, so we'll close it up. We're gonna then have a little bit more networking to close up the night. But before we do that, I want to know if you guys have a final thought to share with the audience.
I always like to say that it does sound hard, and it definitely is hard, but that most things that are worthwhile are difficult. So, I mean, all this can sound scary, but there are people, the fact that these types of events are happening all around the world, all of you are here doing this, means there's a group of people that want it to exist, that are willing to support and try. And we've seen it with some of our founders already, and it can happen quickly when you get that traction and starts working. You look back, and you certainly remember the bad times, but you're like, man, that was worth it. And I think that hard problems are always going to be like that. So stick it out. Definitely know who you are. If you aren't willing to go through that, be honest. Join an early stage hardware startup instead of founding it. Or join one after maybe a Series A and there's a little bit more runway, versus being the guy that starts with the girl that starts it and you aren't really certain that you are willing to fight that fight when there's no proof yet. So it's all good. It's worth it. Keep going.
I would say expectations are important. So it's a lot of fun, personally, and I felt like if not for anything, don't be afraid to fail. You know, just try it out. It's one of those life experiences where it can be extremely fulfilling, even if it's not monetarily successful. So don't give up. Give it a try, and I think you'll be surprised.
So I just have one advice that I'd like to give. If you're stressed, if you're confused, if you don't know what's going on, if you're worried about getting something finished, this is a signal that's built into humans to go home and be with the people in your life and get away from work. It's actually healthy, and you'll find that you get through your challenging problem if you remember that simple thing. Put a Post-it on your, whatever it is. This is go home.
Yeah, I would say find a co-founder as early as possible. I mean, many of you, I'm sure, have co-founders if you're entrepreneurs, but I think it's very hard to build a business for very long on your own. You know, it makes, there's nobody to bounce ideas off of, there's nobody to call bullshit on you. And also, I think it's sometimes a signal that if you can't convince somebody to join you, that might be your first negative piece of feedback in customer development. And it's also a signal for investors. We see a lot of, for some reason in hardware especially, there's just more single founders than I've seen in any other category we've done. Haven't necessarily pinpointed why that is, but find a co-founder early if you can.
Who's not an engineer, if you're an engineer. We see so many hardware startups where it's all three engineers kind of with engineering speak. So great, thank you guys so much. Really heartfelt thanks to a lot of heartfelt